Good morning, everyone. All right.
Boy, we're off to a great start.
Yeah, no, we have to keep that one, though.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to episode 10 of CAD to Cars. And we are in Will's garage.
Yep.
Will has to leave soon, though, because Will's going on a trip.
Yes.
Where are you going, Will?
To get that truck. To get the old 7.3.
Oh,
Yeah.
that sounds interesting.
So, yeah, we talked about that. And, yeah, today's the day. It's Rocky's birthday this weekend, so
Oh, boy.
that's kind of why, part of the reason why I'm going this weekend in particular and didn't go like 2 weeks ago when I actually bought it, but...
Because you can't miss out on Rocky shenanigans for his
Oh,
birthday.
it was so bad last time, though.
You're going to not talk
Well,
about
specifically the bachelor party.
it. Oof.
Oof.
Like on a scale from 1 to 10, how big of an oof?
Well, I mean, this time I'm not planning on being back Monday or Tuesday, so just
A regular oof?
yeah.
Okay. What's going on, Kevin?
We'll see.
I don't know. I have a bunch of days off because I didn't take enough vacation this year, so
And everything's canceled, so.
yeah, everything's been canceled, so why would I take time off until it's about to renew?
Yeah.
Just kind of waiting for something to happen, but it hasn't really. So I'm doing nothing. I'm just working on the car, starting to dig my gas line trench for running out gas out to the pole barn.
Mm-hmm.
So we get the heater, try to get the heat in before it gets cold. So
I don't think it's going to get cold anytime soon, honestly.
No.
yeah, but if I don't do it now,
It's true.
and I do it in 6 months, it'll be getting
You'll be
cold.
digging in the frozen ground, which is never fun.
Yeah, so tomorrow I'm going to try to rent the trencher and have at it. We'll see. It's
Yeah.
not a fun process at all.
Are you doing anything on the drift car?
I'm
Yeah, I saw
fixing
you-
some damage from last year that happened at the end of the year. Someone spun in front of me and I stopped, and then someone hit me from behind. So we were
Hey.
in like a 10-car train at Killcare. It's just, that place is wild. Drift Indy runs a tandem line and a not quite tandem line. So it's, all right, space them out, I don't know, 2-3 seconds on the non-tandem line, and
Oof.
tandem line, just everyone who's in their line, go. Don't care if there's 3 cars or if there's 20. They all go at the same
Unload
time.
the whole
So
thing? Yeah.
one person spins up front, and it's like,
Multi-ball.
yeah. So I had a little crunched in headlight area to kind of clean up, and took the body kit off because there was pounds of rubber stacked up in there, and cleaned things out a little bit. Test fit my new tires with the 265 Kendas.
I did see that.
Had
Some thick boys.
had to do a little bit of body kit trimming in the back to make them fit right. So they should clear now. And if it doesn't, then it'll just move the kit, I guess, right?
Or it'll just auto clear the first one.
Yeah,
you go
yeah,
out.
it's definitely a self-clearance thing.
Yeah, that's fine.
for sure.
That's what we're all
Fast
about,
moving rubber and
self-clear.
fiberglass, they meet and they just kind of,
Yeah.
one
Did you cut
disappears.
out your wheel wells more, too?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did. I had some,
Taller diameter?
yeah, I was rubbing a little bit here and there.
Hmm.
Just, it's not a fun process to do that stuff. You just
No.
get grinder dust everywhere, and then you gotta grind it down. And
Did
I
you
didn't really.
Did you use 2 grinders, Kevin? Did we make sure we had 2 grinders?
Mm-hmm. One flap disc, one cutoff wheel?
Oh, well, I mean, I put new brushes in my old grinder, and then they died in like a week. So
Oof.
they were not the right ones, and I made them fit, and then it didn't work. So with one grinder, I did this, and
Yeah.
it sucked. And
You
just
broke the
got crap
cardinal rule.
everywhere, and sparks going all over the place, and not fun. But I also don't really care too much about how the finished result looks, so I just kind of
Well, it's
cut
gonna
some
be
slots in
covered
it
anyways,
and
right?
hit the inside of the wheel well with a hammer and called it a day.
Yeah, it's fine. Like I said, self-clearancing.
Yeah, basic, you know.
So when's when do you know when the actual first drift event is?
It's already
It's
been.
already
a while.
been-
Or like,
I got 2 runs on my first one, yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
and then-
yeah.
Oh, we
That's a good
remember
point.
that.
I
Yeah.
think I talked about that last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
But that's fixed now, so.
Good.
Yeah, July 5th, Mike and I are going to pit race.
Whoop.
Open
I
parking
think
lot
I
style
have a
drift
4-day
event
weekend
with,
that weekend. Maybe I'll tag along.
Yeah.
Maybe we can do a live podcast.
a lot of people
episode.
say they come, but then they don't, so.
That's true. That is true, though.
Who are you firing their shots at? I'm not really sure.
A lot of people, they're like, oh, I want to go to I want to come, hang out with you guys and go to the event. And
I mean, I
the
came. a
event
bunch of
comes
times
around,
last
they're
year.
like, I don't know, an hour and a half
Yeah, he did.
drive.
He did come.
I did come.
Yeah.
I was there.
It wasn't aimed at you. Just saying. A lot of people say they're coming and never do.
Oh, I know.
You actually came through.
I enjoy going to that. It's fun to do.
Yeah, Paradise, pretty open parking lot.
Oh, yeah.
Just like cones set up, basically.
Mm-hmm.
They recently repaved it, so it should be nice and smooth.
Yeah, it's supposed to be
And
a lot
should
better
be.
now that they repaved it.
Supposedly, they've also given them more space, so
Good.
Okay.
there's more area to play with.
Interesting.
Sweet.
Awesome. So July 5th. Cool.
So I fit.
What about you, Mike?
I've just been trying to get my drift car done so that I can go to that July 5th event.
Right.
So I put some bumpers on it over the past 2 days. So that's done. Now it's just time to like do body filler stuff that's gonna suck.
Right.
So hopefully if I can knock that out next week, which really shouldn't be a problem, then I can drop the panels off at Amigo, get them a color, jam them on,
color.
and then
No,
I
I
have
don't,
to like do a valve cover gasket or something dumb. Which
I don't
isn't an
remember
end
if
all.
that car was. It's regular. It's uni black. It's not black magic pearl, right? I don't think they had
It's
that.
not
Oh,
a
he's gonna
pearl.
get whatever black is in the gun.
Well, I think
Yeah.
it's just if it's just black, it's just black. It just goes.
Yeah. There's no metallic or anything. in it,
Okay.
So
It should be.
it is
fairly-
cleared. I wasn't sure if they were single stage at that time, but this one isn't. So I
Yeah.
know older stuff was, but I don't know.
I feel like Volkswagen's always been a multi-stage, not a single-stage paint.
The reds weren't.
The reds weren't.
Yeah.
I didn't know
that's
that.
where-
Interesting. Huh. What about the Audi?
Oh, the Audi. So, last Sunday, spent all day cleaning the gas tank, which was awful. So I pulled it out, sprayed out the hose, an astronomical amount of rust came out. I could probably get 6 inches of a 5-gallon bucket out of the rust that came out of the tank. Bunch of floated it out with the hose. I filled it a million times, and then I filled it with some gravel that is in my yard and shook it for a while, knocked a bunch of that loose, flushed that all out too. Now inside the tank is clean, which is great. Put the tank back in. Did not fix the running issues, but figured because it's already full of rust. So I pulled the CIS unit, the fuel distributor shenanigans apart again, cleaned it for the 10 millionth time. And for some reason, cylinder number 5 is still spraying fuel when it shouldn't be.
You pulled the injectors apart.
Yes, and I've swapped injectors all over the place. They're new anyway. So it doesn't follow the injector. It's the fuel distributor. Number 5, no matter what, is spraying when it, below idle when it shouldn't be spraying at all like all the others. So I can't figure out why that one's blowing through the pop-off pressure thing.
Huh.
So I think next week I'm going to look for some motorcycle carburetors, cut the intake up and just jam those on there and hope it sounds cool. Is that thing die?
No, the fucking camera shut off. Keep going.
But yeah, so
CIS isn't fun.
CIS isn't great, especially when things are old and rusty and kind of having a hard time here. And this isn't a car I wanted, I'm not trying to keep this original. I'm not trying to sink a bunch of money into this motor. It's not its end all.
Yeah.
But
So-
it does run.
It does run, and I like it.
Right.
I like how it looks. I like driving it around. It's something different, and it's a back burner project, but that doesn't mean I want it to sit in my yard stationary forever.
Yeah,
I'd rather
if you don't
drive it around.
try and stay on top of it. It's one of those things that'll just.
Yeah, just
wither
letting
and die.
it sit is awful. So,
Yeah.
something I can take to the store, drive to work a couple times a week. That's how I prefer to keep it. But it doesn't do that so good right now. So,
Yeah, you were saying it really can't do the highway so good with this
well,
condition.
yeah, that one I think I imagine I fixed that issue, but
Yeah.
now there's a separate issue where
Okay.
now it misfires at idle, and a rich misfire, which is kind of hard to do. So,
Yeah.
kind of at wit's end with the CIS. More that I don't want to throw money at it. I'm sure I could fix it. It's just
Yeah,
it's not
expensive.
worth fixing.
Yeah.
So
I feel like with the Audi 200, I got it and it was running like crap, and I just kind of did a combination of 20 different things, slightly improving everything, and then it eventually got to a point where it was good. I don't really know what fixed it, but it.
Dave, you got any ramblings?
Not really, actually.
Dave.
Everything
Tell
seems
us
to be.
something cool.
I don't know. Drove the Corrado to work the other day. It was pretty hot. Drove it
I saw
home.
that,
It was fine.
You guys have a little car meet going on there every day now. The back corner of the parking lot.
Yeah.
You guys like the cool kid side of the parking lot?
Squad.
I mean, you guys parked there too.
Not over there.
No, you're a row behind. You're like
Oh no,
forming
I
your
just
own
parked there
thing?
because I went and drove during lunch. Yeah, to see what it would do after the fuel pump, and no.
It's all good.
I mean, it idled weird for like 5 seconds, and then it was done, and I was like,
Maybe
"That's
needed to
normal."
relearn fuel trims or something like that.
Probably something stupid.
Overcompensated for low pressure before.
Oh, very low pressure.
Yeah.
20 psi is not good. It's not enough to run a vehicle.
Carbureted it is.
Well,
Too many. What, 7? What do they run at? 7,
5
8?
to 7.
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm not really working on anything right now. I've been looking at tiny things still haven't pulled the trigger.
Yeah.
You guys are scumbagging me into
Yes.
purchasing some sort of
Absolutely.
nonsense
That's a
that I don't
Good
need.
reminder to send you
Yeah.
things.
I actually forgot you were in Tiny Quad Squad.
I haven't
until
really.
this morning.
I've seen your posts, but I haven't really clicked on them because I feel like it's an irresponsible point in my life for me to click on it right now. so I'm just gonna wait like a few weeks. I'm thinking hopefully by end of summer I'll have something to putt around on and
Cool.
crash off of and hurt myself.
Watch, Dave will be the first one to get a snow scoot.
Oh boy.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that is.
They're
It's like
expensive.
Glorious. It's the Moto 4 of snow.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
a
no, I do
Yamaha
know what those
mini
are.
snow.
Yeah,
It's like
my neighbor's got one.
Kids,
At my parents' house.
80cc,
Yeah.
2-stroke, like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my neighbor's got one. He's got all kinds of crazy stuff. in
So
the back of
cool.
the pants.
They're super cool. They made them for like 2 years, so they're super hard to find.
It's called a
And
snow
they're worth
scoot.
$1 million.
And the name is so perfect.
It is.
What was
Snow
the other
scoot.
one? There's
The Sport
the
is the next
Sport,
size
yeah,
up.
it's
It's
the
like
100.
120. Is it 100?
It's 100, I thought.
Oh, 120. Yeah, whatever.
Whatever.
I had when I was a kid, my dad and we had a Polaris something or other 80s 90s garbage snowmobile with no brakes, and boy, I remember that was a good time.
Yep.
Those are the
Wow, what a story.
yeah. Well,
I remember that.
well, let me reminisce here, Kevin. Yes.
All right, let's move on to the
Just lost
topic of the
his own
day
thoughts.
here.
Yeah, we're gonna
because-
talk about dyno stuff today,
Yeah,
which my car's been on a dyno maybe twice, and guess what? I still don't know how
more
they
than
work.
most people.
Yeah, well,
That's true.
Yeah, that's
probably
true.
weren't even gonna talk about.
Yeah, a lot of people
average
just do
dyno
butt
used to.
dynos.
Yeah, it's like, well, I mean, everybody knows that you can get horsepower torque readings off a dyno, see how much power your car makes, and that
Right.
if you're lucky, you pay somebody to tune it on one. But I mean, that's really not what we do with ours.
No, ours is more product validation and testing.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's
But
Which
it
is
is probably
very-
worth running over how they work in terms of just average operation too. I guess that's a good place to start.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a couple different versions. So
Yeah.
You got your engine dyno, you got your roller dyno, you got your hub dyno.
Right.
So engine is literally just the engine on a dyno, just by itself.
Test stand.
No
Mhm.
drivetrain losses, nothing.
What they do on what's the not roadkill? What's the other one? The garage masters or something like that.
A lot
Engine
of
Masters, yeah,
people
that's just
build
Engine Masters,
dynos
yeah.
do that.
Yeah, so that
Yeah.
gives you like straight up numbers. There's no drivetrain losses to worry about, nothing not in the car. And you have your rolling drum dynos like what we
Mhm.
have at work, the
it's like
Mustang.
an inertia dyno kind of.
Yep. You can either have eddy current or water brake.
Oh,
Um,
I don't know anything about that. What's that?
So it's either an electromagnet, essentially, that's controlling the resistance on the rollers,
Right.
or you're doing it through, basically, it's a water pump you're controlling the resistance on the rollers
Ah,
with. So-
okay, cool.
So that's wheels on a drum basically to strap the car down as if it was on the road and kind of drive on the rollers.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's hub dynos, which basically you take the wheels off
Right.
and you hook it up directly to a machine that reads from there. It doesn't have that eliminates
seen
the
those
whole
before, yeah.
issue of
Tire slip.
Tire
really.
slip.
Yeah,
for-
wheel diameter issues,
Right.
yeah, tire growth on the dyno, which can be a problem.
Yeah.
I
of
really
course
like
there's,
watching the dune buggies on the hub dynos do wheelies. in
Oh
the road.
yeah, pick up
That's
the front on
yeah,
that's
the best.
And then of course each of those flavors has 2 and 4-wheel drive versions.
Yep.
4-wheel drive ones are pretty simple and I mean they're obviously more expensive and a little less common, but it's really just a big old belt attaching the other set of rollers to it, and then it compensates for that on just through the parasitic losses.
Right, that's what
calibration.
we have, and we have the most familiarity with is the Mustang dyno. And yeah, ours is we have it mounted in the ground, but it's a all-wheel drive. I forget what 1300 or something like that.
Yeah.
But so yeah, it recalibrates itself with the parasitics. If you have it in all-wheel drive mode or two-wheel drive mode, you have to do that depending on the car you put in. Every car.
To explain to people what parasitic losses are, it's basically everything
After the engine.
Right.
Right.
So from the crank, you have bearings in your drive shaft, you have CV joints, you have differential gears. They all have friction in them, and at the start of a run, you need to know what those losses are. So you do a parasitics loss test, basically, and drive it up to 100 something miles an hour, and then let it coast in neutral. And
It times the window and kind of can figure out how much horsepower at what speeds you're losing or being absorbed by
Yeah,
it.
basically it just measures the drag from everything, which I guess the biggest variable in all that too is even just strapping the cars down. That's like a big, especially like realistically for our purposes, like product testing, if we, I don't know, put an exhaust on a car, test it with stock exhaust, take it off the dyno, put it back on, we want to rerun the parasitics
Right.
the second time because we've unstrapped it and restrapped it down, and depending on how hard you crank it, that's going to drag
Right.
a lot more, and that could be your 5 horsepower that you thought you were measuring as a gain. So
Right.
it's important to kind of redo that stuff.
So what is the most accurate form of dyno
It depends on what you're trying
for
to do.
for like road driving or let's say drag racing or actual driving?
See, it's not that simple.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, see, I don't know.
So there's product testing. There's like actual tuning. There's a lot of different applications for using a dyno,
Right.
and they each all have their pros and cons. So I would say that I know ours isn't the best for like simulating road conditions.
No, it's supposed to be better for tuning, and it is more accurate horsepower numbers with
Yeah,
our.
I think it's probably the closest to accurate horsepower numbers, just because of the whole parasitic calculation that they do.
That's
Well,
why
it's
everyone
never-
considers the Mustang dyno to be like the heartbreaker, because every other dyno will read
Yeah.
high and a little false. The Mustang dynos are supposed to be, if you put in all the parameters correctly and do all your, parasitics and everything correctly, it should read like spot on. And ours has been proven to be pretty accurate in that way.
It's never going to be more accurate than an engine dyno, though, because that's
If you're trying to
Yeah.
get crank horsepower.
right. So if
But
your goal is power
realistically,
numbers,
that doesn't matter though.
Right, yeah, but if someone's goal is to measure the most accurate values coming out of the engine for horsepower and torque, an engine dyno is going to be.
You're right. I
D-
mean,
at
if
wide
we were-
open only. That's the trouble with an engine dynos. They don't work at part load. So it's a water break on all the engine dynos. So you have very little control over that, from what I understand.
Huh.
So you can get like peak numbers, and that works great. But otherwise, it's still a guess. That's why you have to retune it in the vehicle. Anyway.
Probably for a lot of aftermarket stuff, but I would imagine
Well,
OEMs have.
the other problem with that is most engine dynos operate on essentially a standalone. Those that control spark, fuel, all that other stuff as the unit on the engine dyno, and they're not hooking up like a factory ECU to that.
Oh, that's not what I've seen at all.
Really?
Yeah. I've always seen it be an independent setup. You're running whatever you'd run in the car on it.
Yeah.
Pretty much on all of them.
I used to work at Borg Warner. We had engine dyno test cells for timing chains and stuff, and they could do all kinds of stuff. You could have it at 20% load for, it would be days of testing, basically,
Right.
or whatever, however lean you want it, however rich you want it. You can set whatever parameter you want to test those components. So that's probably more advanced than like your Joe Schmo, whatever.
That's not
cranking
what you're
out.
going to find at like an engine builder
Right.
shop.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Huh.
but I guess
I
we'll
mean,
just-
I don't know.
We know the most about the Mustang dyno because
Right.
we spend the
Well,
most
that's what
time
we
with
use.
it.
Yeah.
So
That's what you have the most experience with. That makes sense.
we pretty much strictly use it for product validation. So anytime you have an intake or an exhaust or something, or charge pipes, intercooler, whatever it is, we're using data from that in combination with data from other sensors at times, depending
Right.
on what it is. So like an intake, we want to know maybe pressure drop across the intake. So if you measure it with the stock, you can see how much resistance to flow you have with the stock filter versus our aftermarket filter. Or maybe we want intercooler inlet and outlet temperatures so we can see what the actual temperature is while it's on the dyno. And
like at operating temp.
A lot of times we advertise those numbers on our products. We do like pretty thorough testing.
Yeah.
Validate almost everything, and I feel like a lot of it gets overlooked, but
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
definitely spend a good
Well,
amount of time.
there's so many other companies out there that just pick a number and throw it up there and they go.
Yeah,
That's
well-
what I think the perception is that, oh, look, I wonder like how valid this dyno graph is. Well,
I mean, it came off the dyno, so it should be
it's
pretty
real-
accurate.
They're real numbers. Like, we're
Right.
not making anything up here.
Yeah, nothing's a single poll thing. We're doing at least 4 polls
Oh my God, I remember
to
there's-
verify that. But
There's been days where I'm like, you guys have been working on that dyno literally all day, and I'm like,
oh, we have
what are you
cars
guys even
with
testing.
hundreds and hundreds of polls on them.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you feel bad.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. We've gone
I feel
through
like the-
tanks of fuel
I
without the
feel
car
like
leaving the dyno.
The B8S4 is a good example of
Yeah.
a car that spends a lot of time on the dyno just because of what it is.
I think
And
they've all
the- and
spent
the products that we have.
significant time on there at one
Yeah.
point or another. The M4 spent
Oh yeah.
like 2 months on there essentially doing some tune development stuff, and it was rough. Like we
Well,
ended up
the-
spinning the crank hub on it from that many polls.
Oof.
But
Sometimes it's a matter of just getting enough data for what you need. So
Right.
when I was developing our hopefully soon to be released supercharger cooling kit, I tested other manufacturers' kits. I tested aftermarket pumps to see if they did anything.
Yep.
So I tested a prototype for our design. So I had at least 4 setups, and I had like 4 temperature probes on each, and getting
Right.
things to log outside of the Mustang Dyno software and make it correlate with the numbers that the dyno itself is putting out is a lot of work in itself. So
Yeah,
a lot of back and forth. The more data you can get, the more.
I think that's an important point to bring up too. Is a lot of most places you're gonna have something dyno tested in any way aren't gonna have a bunch of stuff, transducers and sensors set up with the dyno. And like even through Mustang, it's hard to get this information. We figured out that we have, ways we can hook up thermocouples and pressure transducers, and I think we have 4 of each
Yeah.
on the dyno, so that we can record that at the same time as the dyno run and get a lot more information.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been a bit of a game changer just in the way we've been using it, and it's a little abnormal compared to what most people understand for dyno testing. Like you can put a bunch of different info and record it at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's we've kind of been forced into that too with the way like ECU technology has kind of transformed over the years, especially when you're trying to figure out, like we don't necessarily validate a product by tuning for it. We want to know also, like for the end user, like if they don't tune for the part, what can they actually expect?
Right.
So
Does it need a
if you
tune?
put an intercooler on a car, like what's it going to do? Just bolt
Right.
it on, that's it. And so that gets a little complicated because of kind of the way ECUs work nowadays. They used to be, speed density and
Or even mass airflow based.
or
but
math based.
Yep.
not so much calculating load and shooting for that. Like modern cars, it's calculating the load live, as you're driving, and it's
Load is essentially torque.
torque.
So,
Yeah, it's hitting like a peak torque number, and it knows like that's a parameter in the software. There's enough maps in there controlling it where you have a torque map, and it is going to hit those peak torque numbers. So even if you put aftermarket parts on it, you're not going to show a gain because it still knows that you're hitting that same exact torque value.
Yeah, it's just more efficient.
It's-
at it,
yeah, it's more
but
efficient,
You'll
so
never
you
know
see-
that just by looking at a dyno graph. So
Yeah.
we've kind of had to evolve our ways of product testing to account for that. Because while it would be awesome to have full control over a lot of these ECUs, I mean, there's just so many different
Yeah.
applications we deal with that there's no way we're going to be familiar enough with all that stuff to control it that way. That
Right.
just makes things more complicated, honestly, because you're never sure if you're actually controlling what you want to control, and validating a tune itself is like a whole different ball game. So really being able to use these auxiliary sensors and things like that in conjunction with just dyno output, horsepower, torque numbers helps us validate
To give
things
us
a lot.
essentially what you would call a base reading, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the
So-
dyno itself outputs like a pretty basic value. It's really only measuring torque,
Right.
right?
Everything else is
Yeah.
calculated. You're getting basically, it's obviously measuring the roller speed, or just wheel speed,
Yeah.
and then acceleration.
Well, and you have an RPM input,
Right,
which is
right.
important, and that's another issue we've run into depending on the vehicle. Say, an E46 M3. If you try to pull RPM through the OBD2 port, which we can pull a lot of other parameters through, and that's great. So we can log, intake air times, ignition timing, a bunch of other things, and if that works, that's great. But that car's old enough where the refresh rate sucks. So, like, even if you just do a pull, it's every, half a second almost where you're getting an RPM jump. So you look at the dyno graph and it's just stairs.
Yep.
It's completely worthless. So we've had to, that's the only thing that I'm aware of that we still use the inductive clamp on.
Which is funny because, everything used to be spark plugs,
Right.
spark plug wires, and, inductive clamps will pick that up. And that was really easy to hook up to, but now you got to sometimes cut apart the loom a little bit to get a trigger wire off of a coil on
In
plug.
some of the more modern cars, it's just more reliable to do that.
Yeah, it's almost easier just to anticipate that off the hit. And
Yeah, it depends on what else you're logging through the OBD2 port too. That
Right.
slows down with enough parameters.
If you're logging 5 things through this OBD2 port, it can only go so fast.
Right, it's a
So,
single wire communication, so it can't really update information that quickly.
Yeah, you lose resolution. So having a analog-ish type of input for RPM and taking that out of the OBD2 port, then, some cars don't even have an OBD2 port to pull anything from, so you have to get what you can externally.
Yeah, the other thing about the inductive clamp thing that's kind of a weird thing, and you don't notice it often, but if a car, like say knock sensors are tripped, it pulls timing, you'll have a dip in RPM that's not real. So depending on what parameters you're going for, that can be an issue. So if OBD2 port stuff worked great, or if we had an optical trigger, like
Yeah.
off the crank hub, that would be cool, but it's tricky business.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff, like when you're dealing with, engine dynos and places that would typically use engine dynos specialize in some sort of engine architecture and have all this stuff figured out. But we test on so many different engines and platforms that, like, you really kind of need to go for the easy stuff.
Yep. That's why we try to avoid roll speed, because that's another way you can kind of fake RPM. You just hit, or you tell the dyno, like, all right, it waits for 3,000 RPM. You hit the green checkbox when the car is at 3,000 RPM, and then it goes off the roller in that gear. But tire growth alone has changed that dramatically throughout a pull, even with a decent radial tire.
60 psi or something like that.
Yeah, it's still all over the place.
Yeah.
So for the data we're looking for, especially with a lot of the more modern cars, some of these products don't change much without a tune backing it up.
Yep.
If you're looking for that validation, you have
Sometimes
to
I've
dial it
noticed
all out.
that, like, as soon as you swap apart, like, the first pull you make, you might see, like, some sort of real gains, and then the EC will start compensating. You don't give it really a chance to learn.
I've
Yeah.
seen the
But-
opposite too, where actually as things get hotter and as things get more worn in, they grow the opposite way. So,
There's other things you can look for too, like fuel trims. If you see it, like, from the last pull, throwing a bunch of fuel back in it, you know that something got more efficient because it needs more fuel, right? But again, it's one of those things that can compensate for. It can just bring, the load target's the same. It'll just bring everything else back down and compensate for it that way. So, a part of the other thing we try to account for is how we're going to make this marketable too. So not only is it used for data validation, but we know that at the end of the day when we release a product, we want to have some sort of, whether it be a horsepower torque graph or like some temperature differential graph or whatever, that we want to make data kind of comprehensible by the customer too. So
I see a lot of that's kind of difficult with like intercooler stuff because you really have to stress the car. So we're doing like 5 back-to-back pulls and logging temperature, and you have to present that in a way that someone can look at. And
Right.
really, like with this testing, half the work is the actual dyno, and the other half is post-processing it.
Oh yeah, because you have to create a accurate representation of a real world simulation, right? Because with the fans and everything, and
well, I mean, it depends. As long as your base comparison is the same, like your apples to apples, it doesn't just because it's not on the road and doesn't have 80 miles an hour of wind hitting the nose of the car, and doesn't mean that the data isn't real either. I mean, if you did 8 pulls on the dyno, same day, same ambient temperature with same fan situation,
Right.
And then swapped out the intercooler, that's still an accurate
Well, that's-
comparison.
that's
it's
why-
not, it's not real world, but if you
Right,
measure a
you know,
temperature difference, it's still real.
I feel like dyno numbers are take dyno numbers. They're mostly accurate, right? 90% of the time, let's say, and then real world driving, like, it's likely to change, is it not?
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
it's a different test scenario,
Right.
really. I mean,
Well, that's what I mean,
you're
so-
trying to do is compare A to B. So unless
Right.
you're like on a drag strip at the same temperature, at the same
Right,
altitude,
unless-
same humidity, this and that, the other thing.
Every component is the same exact temperature as it was
Right.
before.
Right,
'cause, I mean,
exactly.
coolant, you can't go off coolant temperature either. I mean, ideally you'd be out there with the IR gun and
Yeah.
checking the heads, checking the manifold itself, and things like that. Like there's usually only maybe 2
Yeah.
intake air temperature sensors on a car, and that doesn't account for very much.
Right.
So,
It's
a lot of considerations.
A lot
Oh,
of
yeah.
factors that can make a test not valid or not show you the results you want to see.
Well, I wouldn't say it wouldn't necessarily be valid. It just might be different in a different
It's
situation.
very easy to
right?
make that information misleading too. We see that a lot, with competition, just trying to, some of these numbers seem astronomical, and you actually test the product and be like,
Right.
yeah, no, it's half that. Like
Yeah.
maybe this one time you were able to let the car sit and,
Yeah.
deheat soak a bit, then you'll pull
Right.
deheat soak, cool off.
Deheat.
D-heats.
There's got to be.
There has to be.
Right.
It wasn't
Unheat.
coming to
It's
me.
not coming to me now because you've given me deheat soak.
Yeah.
Can you
In
just
a perfect
unheat the car?
situation, right? The testing parameters would all be the same, right?
Right,
But
but
they're not,
it's
and they
very,
never
also
are.
very easy to use a dyno to produce misleading information.
Sure.
Right.
That's
yeah.
what is the tricky thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want me to make this exhaust make 20 horsepower.
I mean, that's
I
why
can
we.
do
That's
it.
why we have. Right.
Right.
Exactly. That's why we have cars on the dyno for
Yeah.
a week straight.
Ooh,
Testing
another tricky
multiple
one
days.
too is if say you're testing like a relatively easy to swap part, maybe like a filter on a stick, right? You're going from
Filter on a
like a
stick.
stock airbox to just putting like a filter on the end of your stock inlet.
Right.
It's easy to do a pull on a stock-ish car otherwise with the stock airbox, and then you don't even have to take it off the dyno. You put the filter on or intake, whatever it might be, and do another run, and you see that it makes like 20 horsepower.
Oh, right.
Well, that's cool, but that seems like a bit much, and you didn't consider the fact that if it was a rear-wheel drive car, that the trans and the diff, they weren't hot for the stock ones. You do your second set of runs, and everything's nice and spicy, and
Right.
fluids are thinner, and
That's another thing that's been
less
very
friction,
important. is
more movement.
Yeah.
warming
more
up
power.
or getting the car up to temperature on the dyno takes significantly longer than anyone thinks.
Sure.
We've all run into this,
Yep.
especially if it's colder out too and the car's been outside.
Yeah.
Like going through before you can even do the parasitic losses.
It's
Like
the
you have
biggest
to
pain in the winter because
It's
we don't
awful.
stop testing throughout the year, and Ohio winters it could be 0 degrees outside.
Right. It's -10.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you gotta
but
run
this
the
car
car
on
for
dyno
half an hour at like 90 miles an hour on the dyno to get everything up to temp with the diff and the trans and everything like that to even get repeatable numbers.
Right.
Never mind accurate ones.
Right.
Like, it's wild.
Yeah.
You don't think of how much
I guess I never.
transmission temps changes.
Yeah,
up.
I mean, I guess I never really thought about it that much because, like, I don't dyno my cars frequently because
Without
none
a whole
of
lot
them
of
are fast.
experience, I mean, it's not something you really
No,
would
I mean,
consider.
right, and I mean, just thinking about, obviously, testing parameters change, like I said, and it's just. You're
Yeah,
not
you
even.
kind of always got to be skeptical of your work and your
Yeah,
data.
you
and
can't
everything,
just
too. Like,
one and done it. You can't.
being able to back it up is
Yeah.
Yeah.
the big. I mean, that's with any scientific
Yeah.
process. Yeah.
hypothesis or whatever.
Yeah, like the temperature thing's pretty easy to notice once you know what you're looking for because
Right.
you'll do the first 3 pulls and it'll keep gaining power.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, well, everything's just getting up to temperature. We
Right.
haven't even plateaued yet.
Right.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I know I'm guilty of like probably some of my earlier projects 5 years ago, and I didn't have a whole lot of dyno experience. Like I know for a fact that some of this stuff totally forgot to like even running the parasitics. The first thing you do when you strap down a car, load up all the data, is run a parasitic, and everything's cold. So the parasitic that you just
Yeah.
used for all of your
It's
data moving
inaccurate.
forward is with a cold drive line.
Yeah.
Right. So you got to really think about it and do that stuff first. So
I feel
It's
like
at
this
least
is a good time to say
right.
you should never cold send your car ever. I feel
No,
like
I
this-
mean, yeah, we would. Yeah,
Part
that's,
of that,
that's what I'm
too.
saying. It's easy to
Kevin's
remember
like-
to make sure the engine's
I've
warmed
been doing it
up
for
and
years. It's
everything,
fine.
but
Uh,
I'm guilty of that though.
yeah,
I feel like everyone's guilty of that.
the
at
engine
least
that's been in the
once.
drift car has been doing cold rev limiter burnouts for years. It's been fine. Won't be the first time nor the last time, to be honest.
Yeah.
Can't say anything's really
Not
gotten
saying-
mad.
Yeah. I mean, if something's worth money, I certainly wouldn't be doing it. But heat of the moment, it happens.
Cold at the moment.
No
Cold of the moment.
No
Now
pen.
you get all excited and amped up.
Unheat
gonna
of the
happen.
moment.
Deheat.
Unsoaked.
Unheat soaked of the moment.
Yeah.
Deheat soaked.
Deheat so.
So you cool it down. You probably would have worked fine.
Yeah, I know, but it didn't work. It was thinking in terms of heat soak, not temperature.
So, what do you guys think the most? I mean, obviously, it depends what you're testing, but what dyno type is the most accurate dyno type for, like?
It depends.
Yeah,
on
Because
what
we
you're
never
I
doing.
feel like
really
this is
circle
such a
back to
broad
that,
question,
yeah.
and I'm trying to not make
No,
it
no,
a
no.
broad
That's
question. But like,
that's fair to bring that up again because we did say that it depends on what you're using it for, but never really kind of circled back and said what
Right.
they're all best for. So, yeah, I would say that lawnmowers, you know. Engine dynos, I guess we'll hit that one first. I mean, that's probably the most accurate in terms of tuning, if you want to tune for engine modifications.
I saw
right?
Mike make a face.
He did.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I don't agree with that because the loading's not accurate. Especially, I'm thinking more of if you're doing like a drag car or something like that.
Fair.
The amount of
Fair.
times you run into issues just
I'm
with the
not-
way
yeah.
a torque converter loads the motor, that changes your tune dramatically.
Well, that's
Yeah,
that's just
tuning's
what I'm saying.
gonna
Like,
get
it's
complicated
confusing to
because-
me not knowing because like I'm like, right, there's multiple different types of dynos, right? So like, what?
It depends on what you're going for. For us,
Like-
like product validation and stuff, and trying to get accurate numbers, the Mustang inertia, like any current dyno,
Yeah.
is
Any
pretty good.
any
if you
current
know how to
dyno you're
use it
going to
right.
see
Right.
at like a
It's-
local shop that is doing tuning and testing.
But realistically, I mean, if you're paying for like a real high-end tune, regardless of what type of dyno or Mustang
Right.
hub or engine, if you just put an engine in something, a good tune they'll do some street tuning too. Like after you get done.
Yeah.
Well,
with
yeah,
the
you can't
dyno
just
and
do it
everything.
once and be like, okay, it's good.
Yeah, I mean, you can do
Well,
wide open stuff, and you can simulate street driving, especially on the Mustang stuff. You can simulate
It's tricky.
different loads,
Yeah.
but it is hard, and it's never perfect. So
Right.
the best thing you can do is just go out and drive it on the street if it's a street car. So
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
change whatever you want. Like
Yeah.
you see some videos on the internet of like a car doing a 1 through 5th gear pull and like ripping. It sounds like it's absolutely
watch
tearing
shifts
up,
and everything.
and
like what?
it's got like no load on it. So
Yeah, it
it's-
sounds like it makes 900 horsepower, but it could be a 300 horse car.
Sure.
What was it, Motor Trend or something like that? Tested the C8 a little while ago and got
Ooh, they
crazy
screwed that up.
numbers because it was the
Yeah.
Mustang software. And I know exactly what flaw they ran into because we
There
run
was
into
two.
it.
There was a
Uh-oh.
glitch with the software, and they didn't come out and say it in the Motor Trend article exactly, but they did say it was like a software issue, and we know exactly what that was. But the other issue was they didn't have vehicle data for the C8 yet, so they
That's
used
true.
the C7, and
It's a little
just
different. But the
I feel like-
Mustang,
wait,
the
wait.
glitch in the Mustang
Mid-
software is what did it.
Mid-engine C8 or
Yeah.
Yeah.
so they use
There's
C7.
no other
yeah,
C8.
there's no-
There's no other.
Isn't there? Weren't they making? Wow, I thought they made a front engine one too.
Nope. C7.
You're gonna wish they cut that, huh?
Too late now, Dave.
I gotta.
Don't cut it, man.
But yeah, so like the
I've-
Mustang software, there's an issue with one of their more recent revisions where if it crashes, it flips itself from 2-wheel drive to 4-wheel drive or vice versa, and
Yeah.
doesn't tell you. Like it just does it in the software parameters, not actually
It'll
the
still
physical
display
dyno.
Wait, the
the
dyno
correct
does that?
dyno mode
Yeah.
that you want.
Oh.
Yeah. It was, boy, I don't even remember when we really
It was Mike's
figured this
winter
out.
beater. When Mike, stupid 944 made like 230 horse or something like that.
Yeah.
We're like, no, absolutely
Yeah.
not. And then we figured out that it was
That's
glitching.
not right.
Well, it was
Like,
weird because we verified. We're
126.
like, because we're like, oh, does it think it's in 4-wheel drive mode? And no, it says that it's in 2-wheel, but the software is interpreting all the data as if it was 4-wheel, and
Yeah, you have to
had
toggle
really
it
no
on
way of
and
knowing.
off and back on again.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not 4-wheel and it says 4-wheel and the rear wheels
Exactly.
or front wheels aren't moving, I mean,
Right.
Well, that wasn't even it. I mean, it would still leave those rollers disengaged, so it would still run in.
Yeah, that's like a
2-wheel drive
separate
mode.
thing on the dyno. So
That's a mechanical lock. So.
So I think they ran into that exact same issue because it drastically increases the numbers.
Right.
For sure.
And then
Yeah.
we put the Audi on the dyno, and nobody believed that it made 170
Yeah, because yours
horsepower.
went first, and then mine went after it, and it was like 200 and something. And you're like, no.
absolutely
And
not.
then
This
Kevin
is
never
not-
reran it, and now the
Yeah.
car's dead.
I still
so.
think it's valid.
We know.
It did feel quick.
It did feel pretty good.
That
And
seemed
honestly,
reasonable
like,
for that car.
I think there's a lot of noise when you had the Audi.
Just
I think
saying,
that was
never
it.
verified.
yeah.
The noise is plenty.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess essentially, I think there was a point to bringing that up.
Yeah, it depends on what you're going for. Like, just for numbers, I think our stuff is, the Mustang / Eddie Kurt dyno is more accurate. If you're doing tuning stuff, like I know a good friend of mine just bought a hub dyno, and that's more accurate for him simulating load and being able to tune certain parameters.
Okay.
Not necessarily, I mean, I'm sure it's accurate with the numbers if you have the software set up correctly.
You can also get a lot more reckless with the cars on it too, and like not having to worry about jumping off rollers and.
I don't
things
know.
Yeah,
like
that's
I've
true,
seen
too.
those before, and I'm always like, "That's really." It just
Well,
looks
okay,
weird.
no,
to me. It just
no
looks
mega
looks.
high horsepower like drag car
Right.
is going to be able to like actually run through all the gears shifting
No,
on
you
a
just
roller
gotta
dyno.
rip
And like
everything apart.
an automatic, torque converter type drag car, you can't load the converter correctly because that depends on the weight of the vehicle.
Right,
So
you just
getting
break them
that
down.
to come up on the converter and put out a number is
Yeah.
very difficult unless you know what you're dealing with.
Plus, I mean, I feel like once you break, I don't know, 1,300 horsepower, it's extremely hard to keep traction on the dyno.
Yes.
A roller dyno.
Yep,
So
for sure.
You take that out of the equation too.
Oh,
Which is
yeah.
nice.
All rollers are kind of sketchy in the first place.
I mean,
Yeah, it's just a neural
we've all
roller,
sat on
so-
YouTube for hours upon end watching dyno fails,
Dude,
and like
dyno
we're always
fail
like,
compilations
"Oof."
are like probably one of my favorite things.
I think my favorite ones are when they put the diesel trucks on there that are pushing like 130
Smoke out the
psi,
whole
and they're
shop.
just like, "Yeah, I'm blowing fire out my stack," and then the whole rear end just explodes.
all the tire noise.
Yeah.
I have had one of our cars go through a strap on the dyno. The exhaust
Oh,
is closer
yeah.
than we thought.
Is it?
It was the M4.
Ooh.
I was in that. And
And a
we
strap
melted,
just.
melted through one of the rear straps because we used to cross front and rear straps.
Right.
This is the time I decided I'm no longer crossing rear straps.
Oh.
Cross the fronts, especially if anything's ever in all-wheel drive, because it keeps the car centered on the rollers.
Right,
If
yeah.
anything ever goes wrong, it keeps it
I
centered.
mean, it's
That's
just
good.
gonna get speed wobble at that point, right?
Right, but otherwise, if you have them just straight, it can move from side to side.
Okay.
Especially
But-
if one lets go.
Yeah, but the trouble is, if one lets go in the rear, it pulls it to the other side.
Oh no.
So
Yeah,
that
that's
was
no good.
alarming. Luckily, I wasn't a fast pull or anything. I was like starting to do a pull.
Mhm.
I started to load it, and it just like popped and went to the side, and I got back out of it, straightened back out, and then we slowed everything down.
Yeah, like what do you do? You just have to wait.
Yeah, what do you, I mean,
You
what
can't
do you, what
touch
can
the
you
brakes.
do? Right,
you can't
yeah.
do anything.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
touching the
touch-
brakes on the dyno doesn't do anything. There's so much inertia there. Like,
Yeah, no, because I mean, there's
Crazy.
just so
What's
much.
the weight of that flywheel? Do we know?
I don't know. I mean, you've just pushed it with your feet just like I have, and it's very heavy.
It's heavy. Yeah.
So,
I still want to put a Moto 4 on it.
yeah, I want to do that
Or
too.
two.
Yeah.
Maybe two. We need one on each roller.
Makes a total of a whopping 6 horsepower.
Combined, maybe if you're lucky.
Yeah.
Maybe.
If it could spin the roller.
Right, if they could spin the roller.
It'll get there eventually.
Give it some. We'll help it.
It'll go.
Oh, yeah.
Won't be accurate at all.
Huh.
So yeah, I don't know. We talked a little bit, I think, about product testing and validation, and I guess we could talk about like actual tuning, which we probably have
I don't have-
less experience.
Yeah, we
with.
have definitely less
Maybe
experience
not
with
even
that.
enough to attempt to talk.
I'm afraid to talk
Yeah.
about that because I feel like we're going to talk ourselves into a corner pretty quick.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
In terms of other product validation, though, we did just get a flow bench.
I was gonna bring that up actually.
That was
because
that's-
what Derek was testing an intake on it the other day. I don't remember what it was
Yeah,
for.
yeah.
Maybe a Jetta or something.
So-
A
I
what?
did, and I tested some stuff today. So
Yeah.
that's been a very useful tool, especially what really brought the flow bench as a necessity to us is all these newer cars that have a torque-based software. So like,
What do you mean when you say torque-based
So we
software?
just
Yeah,
talked
or-
about that load targeting and things like that, and
Okay.
being
Like-
able to measure things that way. And there's still data we can get from the dyno, but like I said, you're not going to get really accurate horsepower torque increases
Okay.
because you're just increasing the efficiency, not really the output of the engine without tuning for it.
This
Right.
like isolates the part you're testing.
Yeah.
So you could say A
Right,
to
so you,
B.
can, so you can actually see like what
We
it's
would also
actually
know
doing.
what the part is capable of.
Right.
Like, regardless of whether or not the car that we install it to test on is capable of doing 600 horsepower, we
Right.
know that Kevin's intake can
Right.
flow enough air to support 600 horsepower, which is really cool to advertise as well. So,
Well, yeah.
And
This
we
part
can
can
test-
handle up to X amount of horsepower. I mean,
Right.
that's
yeah,
it.
yeah. So,
I mean, I'm not-
it's more. I think it's more valuable, even in terms of a marketing perspective, than it is to try and explain why it didn't make any power on the dyno, but why it's still good.
Right.
You know?
I'd say it's even
complicated.
more valuable that we can now test FDM components.
Yeah.
So we're
FDM.
actually,
What's
our
FDM?
3D printed stuff. That's what we
Okay,
refer
okay,
to
yeah.
as FDMs for some reason. But the 3D printed parts, well, you can't run that on a car for fear of, you know, a
It'll
piece
melt.
of plastic breaking off or it
Right.
melting and then like getting sucked into a
Especially like
turbo
an intake or
whatever.
something.
Exactly. I'm thinking an
You
intake.
might be able to make a pull on it, but I mean,
It's a bit of a
Well, I
risk
feel
for
like-
someone's engine.
I
That's
feel
the
like
thing.
even like a 3D printed part though, it's still got gaps in it potentially, right?
Depends
yeah,
how you print
depends
it.
what you're doing.
Right.
You can change those parameters in how you print it. It can be printed solid.
Right.
But yeah, now we can actually test things on the flow bench that
Right.
you know isolate it from heat or vibration, so we can actually see before we decide to have a prototype made.
before you really spend any significant money.
Right.
Well, that's
Say,
like,
is this better? Oh, should I change this bend here? And does
Yeah.
it make a difference? So-
Did we for the CSL intake for the E46? Did we flow bench that?
We got the flow bench after, but I did flow bench that.
Okay.
So
I feel like
it's-
that's something good to talk about because it's got a very interesting. It's a very interesting intake type.
yeah. So that's you know an ITB car,
Right.
and it's got little trumpets in there. So I played with some of the trumpets to try to, in theory, because we didn't have the flow bench at the time, flow more. And I also changed some of the plenum architecture around to try to make that a little more efficient.
Right.
And it was really cool that I was able to test the stock intake and then our CSL style intake on the flow bench and see, like, I think it was 10% or 15% improvement in
Oh,
flow.
wow.
Which is
That's quite a bit,
That's
yeah.
quite a bit over
Yeah.
something like that. So
Huh.
it's really cool that we were actually able to validate that. Because
Right.
honestly, on the dyno, without supporting mods, like without headers in a
Well, right.
cam or cams in that car, you're
Yeah.
not going to see major gains yet.
No.
So that was a great
Well,
example of
yeah, that's-
utilizing that.
Yeah, that's cool.
On the flip side of that, like I also, I think I mentioned this in episode 1, but I also developed an intake manifold for Volkswagen 2OT stuff, Mark 5, 6, and
Right.
7.
The aluminum.
And you know, the other issue was that actually, because I was constrained so much by just space on that one, I was able to make the plenum larger, but really runner architecture wasn't able to do a whole lot with. But
Right.
it can also accommodate a larger throttle body and everything now. And my concern was that like this probably won't actually flow a whole lot more, but the nice thing about the flow bench was I could test each individual runner and see how much each runner would flow on its own.
Well, I feel like
And-
just the stock 2OT intake manifolds are just.
It's actually pretty good. They look
Oh, wow.
horrible, but they're pretty good.
I think
so. The problem that I identified on the flow bench was that the runner, yeah, of course, the runners themselves didn't have an equal amount of flow. So
Right.
there was a little bit of bias towards the center 2 runners versus the 1 and 4 runners.
I saw
And
that
so-
with mine.
Yeah. So
Well, right. Well, the way that manifold's made is that the intake inlet or the throttle body inlet is centered, right?
Yeah.
So the 2 runners that are in the center are obviously going to get more
and
airflow
so,
than.
so what I did is obviously along with a larger plenum volume, I was able to move the throttle bodies further away
Right.
from the runners themselves, the inlet trumpets, and so that evened out the flow between the runners. So instead of potentially having, because you only have
So-
one set of oxygen sensors on a
Right.
4-cylinder car, and it now eliminated the possibility of having lean and rich cylinders
Right.
able to smooth everything out that way. So
Which is good. I
You
mean,
would never
it
see
may-
that on a
Yeah,
dyno.
it might not be a giant improvement, like overall, but in your peace of mind and for the product at least, that it is flowing correctly in the same percentage at each cylinder. So like one cylinder isn't going to be neglected from, the other.
Well, one holds up the rest,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
if one's running lean or as lean as the engine wants it to run, then
Right.
the other ones are gonna be more rich.
So you're essentially creating a more efficient,
Yeah.
manifold, which is.
Who doesn't want that?
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Right.
Who doesn't want that? More air equals more, more
Well, better.
more chooch. Like, let's
Yeah.
go. So, no, that makes sense.
And that's one of those great examples. Yeah, we're getting lawnmowered pretty hard here. But kind of to switch gears, but that kind of shows you some of the reasoning behind when you should and shouldn't do like meth injection on an intake.
Oh yeah.
Ooh,
It's like
yeah.
that type of thing, that intake specifically, you're gonna get like no meth or water meth injection to those outer cylinders. It'll be
Especially
Oh
with
yeah,
any
that's.
type,
I feel
I
like
mean,
that's
it's-
like one of those times where it's like super.
Do you want me to shut the door? Is that what we're going?
I don't know.
Yeah, no.
I mean, how there's
soon
not
as-
much lawn here, so I can't believe they're still mowing like somehow in front of your
As
house.
soon as you shut it, it's gonna turn it off. It's gonna be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This might be soothing to some people, lawnmowers and birds chirping and things like that. I
ASMR. Get to Cars episode.
Sit back, relax, and listen.
We can just like slowly put whispering engine noises in here.
Yeah.
So
That's
speaking
except for that
of
one.
whispering engine
It's not
noises.
whispering.
Oh, is that a Ford by chance?
Yeah.
Oh,
I see
I
a lot of
wonder-
bad practices with meth injection, though. People
Yes,
Well,
I
it's so
agree.
tempting to run throttle body injection rather than individual port two, and
Right.
like you said, that's a big.
It's on anything remotely modern that, Engine Master did a great test on that. It's, any fluid in suspension is going to behave differently in that type of intake manifold. So, like, something that was carbureted, sure, there's supposed to be fuel vapor suspended. It's designed in a way where you're getting equal distribution.
Right.
But, like, they did it with an LS manifold, and, like, only the rear cylinders were getting any of that throttle body injection
Yeah,
stuff.
I mean,
Which is
a
terrible.
droplet will have a lot more inertia or velocity to it, and just
Right.
gonna go.
Yeah, so
ramrod.
it's
Well, I
smashing
feel like
off the
when
back
it-
of the intake, and
yeah.
just those rear cylinders are getting it.
It's the reason they don't put injectors at the throttle body. They put them in each individual runner.
Exactly.
So-
Well, I mean,
I
there's
mean,
they
many
did.
reasons,
Yeah.
but they used
Yeah.
to do that.
Well, I feel like those cylinders are obviously, if they're taking on 80% of the work, then they're going to wear faster, right?
Well, not even
Maybe.
that. With meth
Potentially.
injection, if you're counting on it, you can blow stuff up
Oh
very
yeah,
easily.
yeah.
It's something that shouldn't really be used as.
If you're gonna do it right.
Yeah,
essentially.
but you can also use it as like a safety.
Right.
So you can say, "Oh crap! Like
Yeah.
IATs are getting way too hot." Okay, well the meth brings everything down into
Well,
a
right.
temperature range that's safe for the engine versus stressing it. But I mean, you could also bring your tune past a point where it relies on the meth, and if it
To
doesn't
keep-
have
yeah.
it, then
well,
Well, yeah,
are
not even
relying,
just that. It's just like, so you only have one bank worth of oxygen sensors, so you're reading the average of 4 cylinders, when in reality it's only 2 of them that are getting that cooling effect.
Yeah.
So
Or
you're
the fuel.
blowing 2 of them up, and the other 2 are still happy, and you're averaging that.
Yeah.
So
Huh.
that's the danger.
so yeah, you can get additional information besides dyno testing, outside of dyno testing, about your engine that is super valuable through full benches.
Yeah.
Right. And in a like more controlled, isolated way.
You're less likely to break things instead of just slapping something on your car and be like, "All right, let's go."
Give it a shot.
Hearing a kaput and some tinging when you're on the dyno.
We're pretty committed by that point too. I mean, we've spent time designing the part and then paying tooling, paying for prototypes, which are incredibly expensive.
Right.
And then inspecting the part and then installing it on a car and then putting it on the dyno and then realizing that the part's no good.
Yeah.
Right.
So you got a lot of time wrapped up in that now versus
It's just a longer format of testing and tuning.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess on the other end of that too is, people say, well, why don't you just run simulation in SolidWorks and figure out if it's good that way?
Oh, the
I
spaghettis.
feel like that. I feel like
Spaghettis
I've
and
seen that.
SolidWorks aren't
I've seen
super
so many
useful.
companies that will send.
It looks cool.
Well,
it looks like
looks
you're
great,
doing
and it's
really
so
fancy
easily
stuff.
believable if you don't know anything, right? So
This
like,
is-
I get stuff from companies all the time.
This
from
is its
our
own
vendors.
topic.
Yeah.
I don't want to dive into this right now.
Well,
Simulation.
but yeah, no, I see it all the time, and I'm like, is that actually accurate? Because like, I can draw lines like that.
It depends how much you put into it.
Yeah.
Is the answer.
Right. You can make it very misleading, or it can be misleading without you understanding it if you don't know how you set it up.
The only thing I can think about right now is the meme that floats around of the cow and the Jeep, and
Oh,
how it's,
yeah. Yeah, the Jeep and the lobster or
the
whatever.
cow
Lobster's
is
the one I
actually
saw. Yeah.
more aerodynamic than the Jeep itself.
Yep. Yeah, I saw the lobster
Yeah.
one, I think, this morning.
And all it was is just like a scaling thing.
Right?
You
Yeah.
can make it look however you
can
want.
make it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the problem though. Is like people will see something and like if they want to believe it enough,
Sure.
if they're like, yeah, this intake will give me 70 horsepower, which is like unheard of,
And,
right?
yeah,
So
if
like,
people want to believe it, then that's good for them. That's fine. But like,
Yeah.
as someone that develops the parts,
well,
I can't
that's where it
stand
comes back
behind
to
that.
dyno, right? So like, if you buy an intake off eBay that says it produces 70 horsepower, don't be disappointed when you go to put it on the dyno and it makes 0.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you just gotta always be skeptical, no matter what you're doing, whether it's simulation in SolidWorks, flow bench testing, dyno testing, whatever.
well, that also goes back to
There's
supporting mods too.
You have to consider every possible way that the data can be skewed. There's
Right.
variables you cannot control. It's just impossible to.
Well, right. I mean, like good examples today. It's like it's humid. It's very humid outside.
I was gonna say we can't control these guys mowing the lawn.
I mean, we could. We just shouldn't.
Yeah, but
It doesn't affect your horsepower.
no, it doesn't.
But no, that's what I mean. Like, you know, humidity and air temperature and, you know, car temperature and.
Yeah, I mean,
you
shoot.
know.
I mean, forgetting to close the hood when you're testing.
yeah.
Oh, we've run into that before.
Yeah, car's off the dyno or whatever, and you're looking at all the data, and you're like, what? This doesn't make any.
Right.
Oh, the hood was open.
Well, right. Well, that's just I
Put it
can
back on,
imagine
gotta
that would
rerun
be
it.
like super inaccurate at that point, right? Because like
Yeah,
you're not
depends on
you're
when
not
you're testing,
well,
but yeah.
right, you're not heat soaking. Like the engine's not getting as hot as it normally would. And
Well, yeah, and you're pulling air from different areas. So
Right.
depending on if you're testing an intake, usually that's the only time it's really an issue.
Yeah.
But
Exhaust, yeah, it doesn't really matter, but
Right. With an intake, you can definitely get some very weird issues.
Well, yeah, because
with
you're
the hood
sucking.
open or
You're essentially
closed.
sucking in, you know, half hot air, half medium air
Actually-
temperature stuff from where the hood would be open.
I think, speaking of like strange issues with the dyno, I guess back in the day when the dyno was in its own separate room, you don't realize how much airflow within a room changes horsepower numbers.
Yeah.
So recirculating exhaust gases inside, and you don't
Well, you're
realize
just
it. Like
taking
you're in the
oxygen
room,
out
but you
of
don't
there,
even
yeah.
notice it. But you're trying to burn oxygen that's already been burned.
Right.
So you'll make a significantly less power. You can keep doing runs back to back. We still run into it occasionally if you have the fan set up wrong.
Yeah.
But our room now is set up a lot better for it.
Yeah. I feel like the old dyno building was just a.
like a shed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
a
mean,
little
essentially, it was
Yeah.
essentially a shed
It's
or a
been
pole barn
afterthought.
with a dyno slapped on a platform, and they're like, "Here you go." But now we have the ability to open the garage door and get actual airflow.
We have
in
like
there.
really good
Cool.
ventilation
Yeah.
in there now
Yeah.
and fresh air.
But you
There's
see a
reason-
lot of videos of guys with dynos, and it's like one fan in this room, and then like the entire room fills with
Ooh.
smoke or something. Like your numbers are completely invalid at this point.
Yeah.
I wanna bring up a maybe a touchy subject, but portable dynos.
Oh.
Let's talk.
I mean, they're just as accurate. Like, there's not a whole lot to. Yeah, this is ridiculous. This is
getting
so
It's
worse.
pretty bad.
All right. Oh, he's fucking blowing the street.
Let's
That's
make
why.
the call.
We're almost done anyway.
Oh,
but you
he's-
gotta get the.
No, no.
Is he done or is he gonna start coming over here?
He's fucking just standing there on the thing with it running.
You get a street pole.
He's done. This has got to be the last pass.
Unless he comes over here.
No, this looks recent.
Okay. We're done. That was
We're done.
Okay.
We're done.
when we finally have
That
our
was
last
incredibly
straws. when we can
frustrating.
Yeah, we're just losing our
We're gonna
minds
go-
with this. We're trying to push through this fucking guy on the lawnmower here. This is awful.
It's talking louder and louder.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the audio file, and it's just progressively gotten larger throughout the recording.
Have fun with that, man.
Yeah,
Um,
sorry about that.
There's nothing
No,
wrong
yeah,
with
yeah.
portable dynos.
No,
There really isn't
right, Well,
anything
that's
wrong
what I
with
thought.
them.
Like, I mean, I've had my car on a stationary
The
dyno and a
hardware
portable dyno.
is pretty simple.
Yeah.
They're just usually sketchy.
Well, right.
It's
That's what
not
I mean
even
from a
that
sketchy
sketchy.
standpoint, right?
Yeah.
So, like, Dyno Dogs for Days, right? Great show. It's local around here, and they usually have a portable dyno, right? And I've seen people pull on there multiple times, and it's like a lifted platform, and I'm just like, I always watch, and I'm like, if that car comes off of there, I'm gonna have a bad
It's
time
very
for everybody.
hard for a car to come off. That's another thing that's misleading.
Right.
It's like, well, I've seen so many people when we're doing pulls back. Oh, should I move my car out from in front 60 feet away in the parking lot? I'm like,
So
no car is going to jump 200 feet forward. Like, it's...
No, I'm saying I think the problem is typically when you're running a portable dyno, you're hauling through cars. Like you're strapping and unstrapping
Yes,
a bunch
that's
of
true.
cars because it's some event where you paid $20 to
Right,
get
yeah,
three
you
pulls
get
or something
three-
like
yeah.
that. And it could be like anything. It doesn't have to be a dyno. It's just it's easier to make a mistake when you're crunched for
Right.
time. You're either not familiar with the cars because I mean we didn't even talk about how differently we have to strap down a lot of these cars, like
Right.
versus front wheel, going through the wheels, going through control arms, subframes. You kind of just have to work with what you got, so you
Yeah.
can keep the straps up off the rollers, but not touching any moving parts, hot parts, things like that. So, if you're operating a portable dyno and you're just, all it takes is one mistake, one misplaced strap,
Yeah.
up against something that's going to
All
shred
right,
it
something
to-
that gets,
for something to go
let's
bad.
say a strap gets caught in a wheel or something, or
Yeah.
it's-
All I know is that I'd be obviously way more likely to put my car in a dyno, a stationary dyno, than a portable one.
Right.
Because you have to rely on somebody's expertise.
Well, that's I feel like
And
around
honestly,
here and
yeah.
and a lot like local shows, right? Everyone's into that. Everyone's like,
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
I just put this whatever on my car, and this show's having a dyno. I'm gonna dyno it.
Yeah.
Like everyone's super
Draws the
stoked
crowd.
about it.
It's cool. It's
Right,
fun
exactly.
to watch. Yeah.
You know, so it's an excitement factor, but like, how accurate would you say the numbers are coming off of that?
If you're in that much of a rush, that's what I was going to say. It's not going to be super accurate. You're not going
Right.
to do the due diligence to make sure your parameters are set up correctly for different vehicles.
Right.
We run into that.
Well, we don't
enough
want to
with
speak.
our
For,
dyno.
we don't want to speak for everyone.
No, not for
you
everyone,
know.
but like there's obviously people that know their machines well enough to have that set up correctly. But
Right.
chances of you getting misleading information are a lot higher in a rushed environment like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it takes
Well,
a lot.
especially it's like Will said, $20 for 3 runs, and like there's a line, and everyone's
Yeah.
like, boom,
On
boom,
and off,
and
on
like,
and off, on and
and the
off.
guy in the dyno operator is probably just like, get it on, get it off, get it on, get it off, like
The whole thing's probably stored outdoors too, like when it's not used.
That's what I
The
mean.
whole thing is,
It might be a little sketchy,
yeah.
but
That's why
Well.
you're not doing tuning there. You're just kind of.
no, it's more of a fun thing. It's no different than
Yeah.
taking your daily driver to a track day and going down and running the quarter mile against your buddy
Sure.
in his daily,
Mhm.
right? It's no different, right? Like you have high expectations.
Yeah.
Will they be
Just
met?
for fun.
Maybe,
Yeah.
but
I rarely have high expectations bringing my stuff to a drag strip.
oh yeah,
I mean, you're
it's never
yeah.
gone great for me.
I've never, honestly, I'm never really impressed with the numbers, right? I drive Volkswagens. I mean, you don't buy a Volkswagen if you want to be fast. But no, every time I've gone to the drag strip, I mean, it's fun. I mean, that's all it is. You go and have
Yeah,
fun.
if you're
and-
not waiting the whole time.
yeah.
That's what I can't.
I wonder if we're doing that this year. I hope we're doing that this year. That was fun. We had fun
The
last
last
year.
2 years, I did like a run and then it rained.
Yeah.
So
So every year we have been, at least for the last 2 or 3 years, a company drag day.
Right,
where we
test-
just go to a local
test
drag
and
strip,
tune.
and everyone brings whatever they want, and we have a lane for our company cars, and
Right.
it's always like October for some reason.
So
We
those
should
most
do it not
optimum,
in
most
October.
optimum
Yeah.
air temps, Kevin.
Yeah, like I brought my 1 Series there, and I just spun through every gear. Okay, it's 30 degrees out. I'm on summer tires. I'm not surprised.
Well, it's test and
Right.
tune, and it's the ECS lane, so they're not giving us any prep either. So it's
Right.
gonna
Yeah.
be pretty slippery. So
Oh yeah. What else? What else about dynos?
I don't know. Maybe
Oh,
we'll
now he's
work
got a
some
weed
prep.
whacker
we
going.
pretty, we
All
pretty
right.
much, yeah.
All right, guys.
We pretty much
We
just
see-
complained about like.
Well, let's see. We
how
missed
many
footage for
things-
10, 15 minutes, and then we complained about the lawnmower.
No, we complained about how many things can go wrong with a dyno
Yeah.
in our experience, which honestly, to most people, is probably valuable information because they don't know that.
Well, exactly. I mean, obviously, I have an idea, right? I take everything with a grain of salt when it's test stuff like that. But like most people are like, a lot of younger people, I'm sure, are like, those dyno numbers are 100% accurate, and it's gonna be the same all the time.
Comparing-
It doesn't matter what kind of situation we're in.
You can't just compare a Mustang dyno to a Mustang dyno number because the people who did it, the time of conditions that were done in, it just
Right.
nothing.
There's so many
nothing.
different. There are at least 2 major different modes on the Mustang dyno software too. You have your control sweep and your vehicle simulation too, and those give you surprisingly different results.
Right. So that's where control sweeps basically the dyno is changing its resistance to get a certain period of time.
Yeah, get the run done in a certain amount of time, which
Right.
is useful for low horsepower cars because you don't want to be doing a 5-minute pull
Right.
and have the thing wide open.
Yeah, it starts to kind of unload it a little bit, let the car get through the pull a little bit faster.
Yeah.
The benefit of being able to modify that and play with that parameter in particular is being able to change the amount of data you're gathering. Say if you were trying to tune a car and you wanted to gather a certain number of, data points for some certain parameter, that can help either make the pull last longer if it is a super high horsepower 3rd gear pull,
Right.
something like that. You can try and drag it out a little bit longer, or
I just
set low horsepower.
I just want to like side note something. I feel like every podcast that we've recorded since episode 6, since I started, there's been some sort of lawnmower going in the background.
Well, it is summertime.
I feel like people are gonna start thinking it's a joke. No, really, it's not. We're just. 'Cause
Yeah,
I'm sitting
well,
at-
after this whole Corona thing, we've been kind of flying by the seat of our pants here and trying to figure out how to record the podcast and everything, and we kind of lost our regular podcast recording location, and
We
trying
only
to
did one there.
no, we did
I wouldn't say
Two.
lost.
Two,
I-
maybe,
yeah.
Okay, so.
But then I said we don't really have a
Huh?
good.
Can't do it at work now. There's people in that office. Like,
Yeah.
'cause
I didn't know
everyone's
there's.
spread
I know
out.
there was stuff in there. I didn't know there was a human in there.
There's a human in there.
There is
Oh,
human.
interesting.
Yeah. So bear with us.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it adds to the element. We're
So
sitting.
do I.
We're,
I
s-
honestly,
we're
I did
literally
listen-
sitting.
I did listen to one
sitting
of
in
the
a
podcasts,
garage.
and I didn't hate the background noise. I was like, that's kind of nice.
It's like it makes it less stagnant,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If you guys don't like our lawnmowers or our weed whackers, then we
Find a
don't
new
care.
podcast.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Don't. We like you.
Yeah.
Stay.
It's fine.
Tell,
Tell
your,
us
tell
about
your
it.
friends.
Yeah. You can tell us about how you don't like the noise, and then we can still have no control.
Or you
over
can
it,
tell us
so.
about how you'd rather watch paint dry, and maybe we'll stream that one day.
Shout out to that guy.
Yeah, you don't
Right.
have to watch the video. It's fine. The
Yeah.
point is you listen to it. And that's a great lead-in. Where are we? We are on iTunes,
Yeah.
iHeartRadio,
Yep.
Spotify,
Yep.
YouTube, kinda.
Whenever
want-
I
if you
don't
wanna
mess up the
watch,
camera.
Go for it.
Yeah.
I promise I'll have it figured out by
I mean,
next
yeah.
episode.
At this point, we've hit all the major podcast places. So
I think so.
Yeah, I think.
Instagram, CAD to Cars.
Just-
Please ask us questions.
Oh,
and
man,
comment
I
on
will
our
say.
stuff.
I will say one thing. Every time I get a like or some sort of anything, it auto signs me into that profile, and I don't know how to turn it off, and it's irritating.
Can't help you there, Val. I'm not an Instagram genius or anything.
I'm like, God damn it. So, but yeah, make sure you listen to us on all of those things, like Kevin said, iTunes,
You don't have to
Spotify,
listen to us on all
iHeartRadio.
of them.
You do have to
Whatever-
listen
No,
to
no,
each
no.
episode
They
on
have
each
to listen.
platform
They have to
at
listen
least
to
once.
every single episode, every waking moment of us on every platform. That's how this is gonna go.
Hey, man, we're actually, I didn't even think about it. We surpassed like a solid 8-hour day worth of CAD to Cars podcasts by now. We're at 10 episodes, at least
Yeah.
averaging like about an hour. So, I mean, you could literally listen to us for a full day of work.
Yeah.
That's true.
It sounds awful.
You can listen to us. You can listen to us ramble about actually
Technical
pretty
difficulties.
different, pretty cool stuff. Honestly, I mean, if you want to learn or if you don't know, like me, I mean, I've learned a lot.
And
I
like
just-
Kevin and Mike said, ask us questions of stuff that you want to learn
Since-
more about.
I feel like someone asked a question the other day, and it went straight to the general messages. Did anyone answer that?
Nope.
That's a
I didn't
no.
see said question.
I
That's a
didn't
no.
either.
Okay, we have
We'll
to
take a
double
look.
check after this.
So maybe we need to pay attention to that a bit more.
Yeah, maybe.
Probably. So yeah, like I said, like Kevin said, listen to us and follow us at CAD to Cars.
All right.
And Kevin's gonna check that right now. Let's see if we have a message. Maybe we can answer the question live in this
Oh,
episode.
jeez.
I don't think we have any questions.
I thought we did.
Yeah,
I
lied.
swear to
Maybe that was
God,
your personal account.
Yeah,
no
we
one
have
is messaging me on my personal
Somebody
account.
wanted to know where you got the wheels that are on the Corrado.
We have no
A
deals.
secondhand guy from
Craigslist.
yeah, a guy that I've frequently bought wheels from, honestly, because he always gets really oddball, weird things. He's got a set right now of I don't remember what they are, but I was like, I might buy those from him. He's got like a 2-piece set of something JDM, and I'm like, those would be cool.
What are you talking about?
I'm
Babbling
rambling
about
about
wheels.
wheels.
Okay. Well, we're wrapping this
Yeah,
episode
so
up
turn
now.
this thing
so-
off.
All right. Well, goodbye, everyone.
See
Thanks
ya.
for listening.
you next
Thanks for
time.
watching.
Thanks for watching.
I
Or
guess.
not watching.
We're not watching.
Well, apparently they want to watch paint dry, so we're just gonna go back to this one guy. He's gonna hate us. All right, goodbye, everyone. Thanks for listening. Make sure you follow us at CAD to Cars and follow us at ECS Tuning to stay up to date on our new products and sales and other things. And I realize that I sound like a
Fucking
whatever.
end it. Yeah,
End it.
jeez.